Good morning, good afternoon, good night, good evening, whatever it is. Welcome to Friday's edition of Pre-Calculus, day number 10. And it looks like there's going to be a whole lot more days ahead of us. So y'all just hang tough. I know you all have your quarantine beards going like I do. So I'm about 2 weeks into a beard. So eventually I'll show you guys when it really looks pretty good. Get a little gray, but other than that, today we're going to be solving trig equations. Need two things. You'll need your identities and a good unit circle. And other than that, you just need some good algebra 1, algebra 2 solving equation skills, factoring, basic solving skills. All right, well, let's get into it. Eventually I'll get this. Okay. So, solving trig equations. This is what you want to put in your notebook. These directions and then some of the examples that we're going to write down. So, we're going to use our basic algebra techniques to solve trig equations. You guys may hear me refer to a phrase called SADMAT. Subtraction, addition first, division, multiplication second, exponents, then parentheses. So just basic algebra skills. We will need to do some factoring. We will need a unit circle. So we will need to be looking at angles and radians from the unit circle. And probably the biggest technique that you will use is the removal of the trig from the equation. So basically, when we look at this equation, these two signs are going to go away. And it's just going to become 5x and an x. And then at the end of the problem, we'll put the trig back in. We'll go to the unit circle, and we'll find our radian answer. Okay? So, again, essentially, we're just going to solve an equation that looks like 5x plus 2 equals x. So we're going to ignore the sign for a moment. And then we'll put that back in at the end of the problem. So solving, just solve the equation. So I'm going to take x away from this and negative 2 away from this. And we get 4x equals negative 2. Divide by 4, x is going to equal negative 1/2. So this is where the sign comes back in. So this is going to come all the way back around and is now going to be the sine x equals negative 1/2. So we have to go find on our good unit circle that you have somewhere, where is sine negative 1/2? And it's going to be more than one answer. So we need to find every y value that is negative 1/2. So here's negative 1/2. Here's negative 1/2. And we can use straight up 11 pi over 6, and we can use 7 pi over 6. We don't have to use the quadrant 1 and quadrant 4 like we did with inverses, because that's not what we're doing. We're finding every place on the unit circle that has a y value that's negative 1/2. So we have two answers for this problem. X equals, that was 7 pi over 6 and 11 pi over 6. Okay, I'm going to put some more in here, right here. Look for all y values that have negative 1/2. And those were the only two on the unit circle that had negative 1/2 as a y value. Okay? Alright, that's a very simple one. They do get a little bit more complicated, so you'll see as we go along here what's going to happen. You can see you have a square in this problem. Not only that, but you have secant. And remember that secant comes from cosine. So secant is 1 over cosine. Okay, remember that. Again, it doesn't hurt to keep your identities close by. As you can see, this is the same one I've been using this whole unit. It's marked up pretty good. Alright, so take out the secant. Just ignore the secant. We'll put it back in later. 5 equals x squared plus 3. And solve the equation. Subtract 3 from both sides. 2 equals x squared. We'll take the square root. Both sides. The square root is going to give us a plus minus. Square root 2 equals x. Now, I'm going to put a little bit of room there so that I can bring the secant back into play. Okay, so we get to reciprocate the square root of 2. So this is going to be, let's do this. We're going to reciprocate. That's going to be plus or minus 1 over square root of 2. It now equals cosine. Because once we reciprocated that, it became a different function. And this is actually square root 2 over 2. Alright, so we are now looking for all x values, positive and negative, all x values on the unit circle that are positive and negative square root 2 over 2. And those are going to be your pi over 4s. So 1 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4, 7 pi over 4. All 4 of those become the answers to this problem. So x is going to equal pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4, and 7 pi over 4. All 4 of those would satisfy this equation. Whoa, okay, let's get that up there for you. All 4 pi over 4s answer that question. Okay? Guys, didn't get many questions today. I hope you guys are keeping up. So I'm here for you. Even though I was on the road, I told you I would answer your questions. Next. Número 3. Okay, this is a little bit, solving-wise, is a little bit simpler because it's sine. So we don't have to replace it with a cofunction. So we have 4x squared plus 1 equals 4. All right, start solving. 4x squared equals 3. X squared equals 3 over 4. Take your square root. X is going to equal plus and minus. Square root of 3, you really can't do it, so you just leave it square root of 3. And yes, you guys know we have square roots of 3's on the unit circle. What's the square root of 4? That's a 2. We will bring our sign back in the problem. Sign comes from the original. And so now we're looking for every y value that is square root of 3 over 2. What do I do with my unit circle? My unit circle has disappeared. Every y value that is square root of 3 over 2. So pi over 3, 2 pi over 3, 4 pi over 3, 5 pi over 3. All 4 of those are our answer. Answers. Got a lot of answers. Pi over 3, 2 pi over 3, 4 pi over 3, 5 pi over 3. Voila. If you've got some good solving skills and you understand the unit circle, then you'll do just fine here with these solving equations. Keep on keeping on. Alright, we're going to ignore this. I have this on a different slide, so we'll just ignore that. All right, so you got a quadratic here. So I told you we're going to need to do some factoring. So just rewrite it without the signs. 2x squared plus x minus 1 equals 0. And factor. 2x, x. They're both going to be a 1. This is going to be positive. This is going to be negative. Solve it. X equals 1/2. X equals -1. Next step is to put the sign back in. You ask where the sign comes from. The sign is the function in the problem. We just removed it earlier. We're putting it right back now. So now we're looking for two different values on the unit circle. So where is the y value 1/2? So y value 1/2, y value 1/2. So these two satisfy the first parentheses, the first answer of sine x equals 1/2. So here, x equals pi over 6 and 5 pi over 6. That's part of the answer. Now, where is the y value -1? So -1 right here, that's 3 pi over 2. X equals 3 pi over 2. Again, good algebraic solving equation skills. Understanding the unit circle, you should be fine. 2 more. We'll be done. Moving right along. This looks like something we actually have done before. Won't be too bad. 4x squared minus 1 equals 0. Solve the equation. Add the 1. 4x squared equals 1. Divide. X squared equals 1 over 4. Take square root. X equals plus minus 1 over 2. So this one's not too bad. A lot of sign problems. So we're looking for all the y values that are 1/2. All 4 of them because it's a plus minus problem. So you got all the pi over 6's. So 1, 5, 7, and 11 pi over 6. All right, so we saved the hardest for last. That one you probably could have gotten without me. We've done ones very, very similar to that one already. So last problem, save the hardest for last, of course. This has a sine and a cosine in this. So this is where we're going to need our identities. So we want to rewrite this as just one trig function. Okay, and in our case, we want sine. So we're going to take the cosine squared. Remember that cosine squared right here equals 1 minus sine squared theta right here. So we're using a Pythagorean identity to rewrite cosine squared as this so that we have a single trig function in the problem. Think of it as an x and a y. You can't solve an equation with an x and a y in it. So we have to get these to be the same trig function. So we're going to use sine in this because we were able to take cosine squared and turn it into a sine squared. So it looks like this. 2, 1 minus sine squared x minus sine x minus 1 equals 0. Okay, we have to distribute, and we have to kind of like simplify this down into a quadratic, just a single quadratic before we can factor and solve it like we did for problem number 4. So we're going to distribute. It's 2 minus 2 sine squared x minus sine x minus 1 equals 0. And we're going to just kind of simplify and combine a little bit. So the 2 minus 1 is 1, and it's going to end up in the back so that we have it in standard form. So negative 2 sine squared x minus sine x plus 1 equals 0. And again, the positive 1 comes from 2 minus 1. So 2 minus 1 is a positive 1. All right. As a habit, not a big fan of having a negative leading coefficient. So remember that you can do anything you want to an equation as long as you do it to both sides. So if I multiply everything, including the 0, by negative 1, I can get rid of my negative leading coefficient. So basically, we're going to change the signs. So it's going to become positive, positive, negative, and 0 doesn't have a sign, so I don't have to change that one. So I'll rewrite that. And hang on, as I rewrite that, we're now going to rewrite it without sign. So it's going to be 2x squared plus x minus 1 equals 0. And now, I do believe we are at problem number 4. This is the exact same thing that we have right here. So I'm going to put C number 4. And then our answers are x equals pi over 6, 5 pi over 6, and 3 pi over 2. Because once we got down to here, we have the exact same problem that problem number 4 was. So there was no reason to go back and do all that work again. We had already done that problem. So there's that. Okay, that's solving equations. I hope you guys are doing well, staying safe, social distancing as much as you can. I know it's hard for you guys. I know this is a tough situation for you seniors to be in, but hang in there. We'll all get through this together. As always, my office hours haven't changed, so please let me know if you have a problem or any questions. Homework's going to be page 7 and 8 this time. Try problems 1 through 20. These answers will be posted because they actually do have answers. As you saw, these had definitive answers. Okay, so please ask questions. I do sometimes get a little bit bored between noon and 2 because you guys aren't asking me questions. If nothing else, just say hi. It'd be nice to hear from you. You guys have a great day. I'll talk to you soon.